Welcome back to The Price of Business. I'm your host, Kevin Price. You know that song, London Calling, and London is Calling. We got Kai Hammerich. He's the author, co-author of the book, Fish Can't See Water. Kai, welcome to the program.
Thank you very much.
Glad to have you on. What part you are from London?
I live in London, yes.
Yeah, there you go. Yeah, I spent a lot of time in London as a teenager and as a child. My mom is from England, and so that would be the highlight of our trip. We would spend most of the summer up in Lancashire, but then we would spend our time just before we left hanging out in London. Always had a good time with that. Tell us about yourself and your book that you co-authored with Richard D. Lewis, Fish Can't See Water.
Yeah, so my background is I'm from Denmark, went to university in the U.S. at Kellogg Business School, and then had a career first at HP, then Apple Computer back in the late 80s, had a fabulous time there as marketing director, and then became a headhunter in 95 in London with Russell Reynolds, and I've been a headhunter ever since. Focused very much on global companies and seeing the influence of national culture, and that's where I bumped into Richard D. Lewis, who is a fabulous individual. He's 82 years old, speaks 12 languages fluently, and is recognized as a cultural guru. He wrote a book called When Cultures Collide, which has sold in almost 1 million copies.
Very interesting. And so you guys found that you had similar views.
Yeah, so what we did, we shared a passion for trying to understand how culture impacts an organization. And the thing we wanted to really understand better is we had seen how the national culture sometimes will enable a company to success, and sometimes the same national traits will derail it. And we didn't quite understand what was happening, and that's what we set out to look at, and that's why we wrote the book.
Yeah, very interesting. You know, it is interesting. In fact, I was reading an article recently, I think it may have been in The Economist, that was talking about Northern Europeans, you know, cultural values are very big on balancing work and life. You know, and as a result, that plays a role in them not being very well known for being upstart, entrepreneurial incubators because of the typical energy and effort required to do that. Is that kind of what you're talking about? Is that among the things you would explore?
Yeah, that's one of the things we would explore, absolutely. And what you can say is that actually some of the Nordic countries are really good at being creative and innovative and, you know, starting up small companies like Denmark and also Finland. And that's the national culture that will either help them or hold them back.
Yeah, very cool, very interesting. So, with your thoughts, we've got a couple of Europeans putting together this book, but it's certainly making traction here in the United States. What are some takeaways for American business owners looking at a book like this?
I think it is a global book, and I think there are lessons for everyone. I think the key lesson, actually, what we want to communicate are two things. One, all countries have the ability to do business and do good and successful business, but they will do it differently. And that's very important. So a bit like when you see the Brazilian play football and the Germans play football, it is very different because they come from different socioeconomic and cultural backgrounds. However, you can't say that one or the other is more effective because they've both won world championships several times. It's a bit the same in business. That's the first point. The second point is that our children are going to grow up in a world where not all corporations are going to look like an American corporation, which pretty much forms the model for how American and Western European companies have organized. You will see them work for Japanese companies, Chinese companies, Indian companies, Brazilian companies that may organize differently and be equally successful. So we got to prepare ourselves and our children for a quite different multicultural world.
Yeah, very interesting, very interesting. And when you see, trend-wise, I'm sure you always like to try to consider some of the trends that are happening. Give us a view of that. Give us an overview of that.
I think there are two trends at the moment. Obviously, the world is becoming more global. And I think Thomas Friedman came out with a book a few years ago called The World is Flat, which essentially says we're all now connected, which is absolutely true. However, that doesn't mean we're all the same. And I think the whole point of our book is to say yes, we are connected. We do work together. But just because a Chinese, drink Coca-Cola and is a supplier to Apple, that doesn't make them like the Americans. They will still be Chinese and vice versa. Mm-hmm. And I think that is a new way of operating, and where everyone who operates in a global company, and most companies today need to be global to be successful, they need to recognize these cultural differences, and those who does that best, they will have a much better chance of succeeding.
Mm-hmm. Very interesting, very interesting. And when did the book come out?
So the book came out essentially in September of this year, so it's only been out for a couple of months.
And how's it doing?
It's doing very well. So we got fabulous reviews in, The Economist, The Sunday Times, Dallas News, Chicago Tribune, Forbes.com, so a lot of people have written quite nice things about the book.
Yeah, very cool. And I'm a huge fan of The Economist. I'm always looking for their work and trying to see what they're recommending. So that's a great recommendation to get. I consider The Economist my favorite magazine out there. So that's very cool. So talk a little bit about your experience or your partner's experience working with U.S. companies in particular.
So I think there's no question that the U.S. business model has been enormously successful. And as I said before, most corporations in the West are based on the principles of management, which were, you can say, invented by people like Peter Drucker and Michael Porter in the U.S. Mm-hmm. And that's, however, the same success for American companies can sometimes lead to arrogance. So one of the cases in the book is on Walmart and how they repeatedly failed to read local markets correctly. They entered Germany, and they tried to be too American too early. And that essentially led to losses, and eventually they exited the market. They did the same in China. They did the same in Korea. However, the good news is they have now learned how to do this and have much more of an adoptive approach when they go into a new country, where they try to recognize the local culture, local shopping habits and values, and that has proven to be a very successful strategy.
Yeah, that's interesting. When did they do that? When did they make that move that you were referring to that didn't pan very well?
Well, that was in the 90s. They went into Germany and started to go into China and Korea. Yeah. So it took them a good 10 years and quite a bit of losses to learn the lessons. And I think what we're trying to say in the book is that you should read the book first, and you can save a lot of money.
Yeah, I think it's imperative to be indigenous wherever you do business. And what's interesting about Sam Walton is that he had a business model that he really used until he died, where he would every morning at 6 or 7 a.m. would get up and start contacting literally store managers all over the country to ascertain what was hot there, what was hot here. And so they had a relatively primitive system when it came to that type of thing. Really, that great system that worked for Sam may have crippled the organization when he passed away. Talk a little bit about that.
You know what? That is a great point. And that's another point in the book, is that as a company progresses from being kind of the entrepreneurial startup company to becoming a more process-oriented, mature company, that original national culture and founder culture will change its impacts. And what we often saw is that when managers do exactly what Sam Walton did, which is being hands-on involved, etc., they set the example, and they inculcate very strong cultures. And usually that's a great foundation for success. However, later on, in particular when they're not there any longer, the board and the management really have to watch out for when those cultural traits may turn against them. And if they don't have the founder, who usually then would have found a way through that, by reinterpreting their own culture and strategy, the new management and the board really need to be careful to make sure that they don't stumble.
All right. His name again, and is our guest today, Kai Hammerich. He's the co-author of the book, Fish Can't See Water. FishCan'tSeeWater.com is where you go to learn more about it. Kai, thanks for being with us.
Excellent. Thank you very much.
When we come back, much more for you. I do want to remind you the best content here can be found over there at usdailyreview.com. And this is The Price of Business.